As you know, integrated pest management, or IPM, is an approach to pest control that relies on non-pesticide alternatives that are effective but more environmentally friendly. In order to help achieve success, an IPM program is broken down into 7 critical stages. The number 1 is inspection. We need to know what are we looking at. We need to inspect very thoroughly to find out what building we're looking at, what potential pests could get into the building, and what's in there. So inspection is the key number 1 step in an IPM program. The next step is analyzing the building layout. We need to know where the building is located. Is it in middle of town, or is it next to a dairy cattle land, or is it next to a horse farm? Because all these things will have an impact on what pests could be brought into the building or potentially could get into the building. The next step in a successful IPM program is pest identification. We need to know what pests we're dealing with. If we know that, half of the battle is won. Let me give you an example of flies. There are small flies and there are large flies. Phorid flies, fruit flies, drain flies are small flies. When we know we have these flies, we know where the problem is, where they are breeding, and what is their conducive conditions. So we can concentrate on that. If we are dealing with large flies, house flies and blowflies, we know they're coming from outside. So we'll look for their sources outside and then try to control them. So it's important that we know what pests we're dealing with. The next step is sanitation consultation. We know that sanitation is pest control, and it has been said time and after that sanitation is pest control. Let's look at what pests' needs are. They need food, they need water, they need shelter, and they need harborage. If we can eliminate all of these or any one of these, then we can impose hardship on the pest and make their life miserable. The next step is customizing the program. We need to look at, after we've done all the inspection, pest identification, building layout, we need to go and find out how we can customize a treatment for a particular building. So analyzing all these conditions are important, and then that will help us design the program. The next step in a successful IPM program is treatment strategies. As we know, in IPM it involves all the treatment strategies available, starting with the non-chemical and then moving on to the chemical strategies. So when we design a program, we need to look at what are our options. The last step in a successful IPM program is ongoing monitoring and maintenance. IPM is a never-ending cycle. It requires a joint venture between the pest control operator and the building maintenance people. For our discussion, we are focusing heavily on this last stage, monitoring and maintenance of your facility, including structural modifications that will help make your IPM program successful. Without vigilance on this last step, the program may fall short of its goals.
Often the most overlooked and critical components of a good IPM program is making sure that pests are not welcome inside of a building, kind of like putting out a no vacancy sign. Today we're going to talk about some of the structural things that we can do inside and outside of a building to make sure that pests just aren't there. We like to call that the ABCs of pest habitat modification. First of all, A stands for acquiring knowledge. It's really important that we know what kind of pests they are, and why they would be coming in, and what would be the attraction. The B stands for best practices. What are we going to do to make sure that those pests aren't coming in? And last of all, we've got to be committed to that program that we put in place. These ABCs will help strengthen your IPM program by keeping pests out of your facility in the first place. So let's begin by inspecting the exterior of your building, starting with the landscaping, and talking about how different types of landscape design can influence pest activity. The most important thing to understand about landscaping is that vegetation should never be touching the building. The reason for that is that often we have insects that are living off of the juices that plants produce, and then they have a perfect highway to enter the building. One insect that really causes us problems in reference to vegetation being too close to a building are ants. They're living off of the juices of a plant, and then if they have a perfect entranceway like a plant that's touching the building, they'll move inside. We also know that rodents will live and burrow underneath plants, And again, that's their staging ground to move in, as well as sometimes yellow jackets may have burrows there as well. So the best practice is to make sure that all plants are pruned away from the building, and better yet, plants ought to be totally removed within 2 or 3 feet of a building. There are also landscaping features you can use that will actually discourage pests from getting too close. Installing a gravel strip around the outside of your building is one of these techniques. Think of the gravel strip as a moat that can keep pests from getting across. The strip should be 30 to 36 inches wide and 4 inches deep, containing 1/4 inch gravel. Water is an essential component for all life, and that includes pests as well. It's really important that you survey your building and make sure there isn't any standing water like we have here around this gutter. We found that there are several areas in which water might be accumulating. One of them is a gutter situation. Another is where you have a drain line for an air conditioning system. Also around parking lots, if they're not angled properly, may have standing water, and particularly roofs are a problem if they're not angled properly as well. Of course, insects need just water to drink, but many insect species like mosquitoes will use it as a breeding ground, and therefore now you have an infestation on your property. Survey your building and eliminate the standing water to reduce pest problems. Let's move from landscaping to a not so sweet smelling component of IPM, that being garbage and dumpsters. You know, the debris that we put in the dumpster is a great attraction to a variety of pests, particularly if it's left there to rot and to decay. 3 main pests that we often see associated with dumpsters would be first, houseflies. Houseflies love that rotting material to lay their eggs in, which therefore the maggots are going to develop. And then what happens? You have the whole infestation going through its cycle. Another pest would be rodents. The rodents that we deal with are called commensal. That means that they like to eat what man eats. And so therefore we put them a great meal right in the dumpster, so they're living around the dumpsters and feeding from it. Another pest would be ants. Ants like to live on the sweets and the sugars and the proteins that we put out in the dumpster, and so therefore they're living around dumpsters as well. There are 2 really easy things that we can do to eliminate those pests from being at the dumpster and therefore entering our building. First of all, make sure the dumpster is as far away from your building as possible. And second of all, make sure the dumpster's clean. A good cleaning program or having your dumpster company come and remove it regularly will really help reduce those pests and therefore minimize the risk of them entering your building. Garbage pickup and monitoring are extremely important in outdoor break areas that workers may use. Uneaten food and drinks are attractions for roaches, flies, and rodents that potentially carry diseases. Obviously, utilities such as natural gas, electricity, and water need to get inside of a building. The problem is those plumbing penetrations are what insects can use to get in as well. Therefore, it's very important that we look around the building and find out where they're entering. Here's an example of a natural gas penetration where easily insects and other rodents could get inside. They need to be filled in. A couple of ways of doing that would use caulking or an expanding foam to make sure that there's no entrance for pests. Like utility penetrations, the foundation or framing of a building also can be a potential area where cracks and crevices have formed that insects can enter. A good example of that is like right over here. You can notice that that's certainly wide enough that ants and roaches and even mice could fit through there. Mice only need the size of about a dime diameter to fit through a building. Making sure that they are closed off and sealed properly will help prevent pests from entering. With people coming and going from an office building all day long, it's easy to see how the simple act of opening and closing a door can have a big impact on pests coming inside. Pests come into our building searching for one of 3 things. Either they're interested in light, there's an odor that's attracting them, or there's a temperature change that they like. Sealing around the door or looking at cracks and crevices below the door can really help make sure that pests don't enter. Doors are not the only way that insects can enter. You also have to pay attention to windows. Windows should never be left open. And if they are open, you need to have a 16 mesh screen. Also check your screen and make sure there's no holes in it and that it's sealed properly. If you do this, insects won't be using windows to enter your building. Believe it or not, the lights on the outside of your building may be setting the mood for pests. Many insects are attracted to light, and therefore the lighting that's outside your building may either discourage or attract them. We found that there are 3 things that can really help you in reducing insects around the outside of your building due to lights. First of all, move your lights away from the building. If you'll do this, then the insects will be attracted to the source of the light and not the building. Second of all, many high-flying insects will see your light and then want to come down to your building. If you protect it, they won't even know the light is there. And third, insects are attracted to ultraviolet light, which is generated by mercury vapor as well as fluorescent lights. If you'll select a high-density sodium vapor light, insects won't be attracted. We've just completed an inspection of the outside of this building. But you know, we're not finished yet. Many times pests enter a building from up on the roof. So we've got to go check that out. Let's first talk about HVAC units. We're up here on the roof of a building, and it's really important that we check out our HVAC unit because pests will associate with them. There are 3 specific things to pay attention to. First of all, the condensation. That means there's going to be water here, a great place for pests to come and have a drink. Second of all, many HVAC units are mounted on a couple pieces of wood. That means underneath there is a harborage area for birds and other pests. This one here has been mounted properly with a good seal. And the third area to pay attention to is penetration. A lot of times, HVAC units will be the area that pests are able to enter a building. Check your HVAC units out very closely. HVAC units are not the only problem on top of a roof that would attract pests. Standing water due to improperly pitched roofs also can be an attraction. And also there's a lot of penetrations on a roof, like vents, exhaust fans, and satellite installations. Check them closely to make sure pests aren't entering your building in those areas. You also need to take note of the edges of your building because these surfaces are places where birds like to nest and perch. So now that we've acquired knowledge on what's happening on the outside of the building, let's go inside and talk about some of the things we need to work on the inside to make sure that our IPM program is successful. When we were up on the roof, we talked about the impact that your HVAC unit can have on pest control. Your HVAC unit, if set up properly, can literally create a positive air pressure when windows and doors are opened up. An easy way to detect what the pressure of your building is to take a lighter or a match to the door and see what happens to the flame. Let me demonstrate. As you could see, the flame was going out, which means this building has positive air pressure, which therefore literally is pushing bugs away from the building. Throughout the course of the day, a lot of people take a trip to the vending machine or lunchroom for a break. Of course, the lunchroom is for people, but it also can provide a pest buffet. Roaches, ants, rodents, and flies all like to eat about the same thing that we do, and therefore things that we put in the trash can may be or create scents that attract insects inside. Once they find that food source, then they may set up an infestation. Pests such as roaches, rodents, ants, and flies like to eat the same things that we do. Therefore, when we put trash in a trash can, the scent from that food will often attract them inside. It's critical that we empty trash cans right after materials put in it. Also, it's important that we rinse soda cans so that we don't attract pests to our lunchroom. Diligent garbage removal isn't just important for the lunchroom alone. It should be practiced throughout the entire building. Trash cans throughout the facility should be emptied daily. Also, they shouldn't be allowed to sit for long periods of time. You know, insects just don't like to eat the food that we do. They also like cardboard and paper products. You know, roaches love to breed in cardboard, so be diligent about making sure that trash is removed on a daily basis. In fact, housekeeping as a whole can go a long way in making sure your IPM program is successful. Just keeping your building clean and sanitary can really help keep bugs away. But what is housekeeping? In a restroom, just making sure there's not water around, or making sure that the commode or the urinals are cleaned properly. Usually bathrooms, lunchrooms, as well as vending areas may have drains. Pests love living around that area. Clean them properly. We've even found that plants may be a source of your pests. Usually the soil around the plant will harbor ants or roaches or small flies. Make sure that soil is kept dry. Even the vegetation itself may have aphids or other scale insects. It's really important that you pay attention to housekeeping to make sure pests don't feel wanted inside your building. Pests are always trying to find a way to get inside a building, as well as our lives. Implementing a habitat modification program, both inside and outside a building, will really help our IPM program be successful. Good pest management isn't just using chemicals. It's implementing all of the means that we've talked about to make sure that pests are uninvited inside of a building.
IPM is truly a partnership between facility managers and pest control providers. Remember that without the proper monitoring and maintenance of a facility, the effectiveness of the rest of an IPM program will suffer greatly. This means looking out for entry points, harborage areas, and attractive environments for both inside and outside your building. Remember to acquire knowledge of your facility, use best practices, and commit to all 7 stages of the IPM program. These ABCs will go a long way toward keeping pests out of your facility.